because of the instant gratification that you get in a lot of different things in life now, you go to do something like join a race team or try to become a race car driver. It doesn't work out early, or any other type of, career in that regard. You're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to eat shit. You're going to have to take a lot of long nights. You're going to have to do things you don't want to do, work with people you don't want to work with. But I don't know anybody else that's had like an easy road to success in racing where they didn't have to do those things. Even people with personal finance or sponsorship from somebody are still going to have to do things they don't want to do, drive things they don't want to drive, work with people they don't want to work with. And that's part of it. So if you're willing to fail, I think you have a chance to succeed.
Ryan,
Yes, sir.
thank you for joining us today. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do? Tell us literally every detail of your life in 15 seconds.
My name's Ryan Eversley, born and raised outside of the Atlanta, Georgia area. I'm a professional race car driver, as well as I guess, professional podcaster, which is weird to say out loud. And then I also host a television show with my partner, Sean Heckman, but all based on racing. But I am a lifelong racer, from mechanic to driver to now media guy too. So it's been a lot.
Yeah, so you were telling us before the call that you were your legacy race car motorsports person. You inherited it from your dad, right?
Yeah, my dad, John Eversley, was a championship winning racing mechanic, team manager, crew chief, all hands on deck kind of guy. Grew up in England, old school type, can weld, better fabricator than mostly anybody I've ever met, and has no ego about it at all. It's really impressive. Like if I was that good at anything, everybody would know it. But he's just a super hands-on old school guy, and we were raised to fix our own stuff and be around cars and racetracks ever since I was a kid. And then my parents met through a green card. My mom married my dad to keep him in the country. He's from England, as I mentioned, and she was living in Atlanta at the time, and so that's how they met. And then about a year and a half later, I showed up, and they're still together to this day. So racing's been in my blood. I've got pictures of me at the Daytona 24-hour when I was 2 months old. And so, sitting here at 40, just turned 40, which sucks to say.
Hey, congrats. I just turned 42.
Yeah, you look great, man.
Thanks. You too. You too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, so racing's literally been in my life since my earliest memories, and so it's basically the family business now.
Nice, man. What class do you run?
I race a bunch of different stuff. So if you race in sports car racing, we do road courses. So if you watch NASCAR, when they're not just turning and going in circles and they're doing a road course, that's the kind of stuff I do. I have done a NASCAR Cup Series race on a road course at Road America, but more common now is everyone knows Formula One from Netflix. So the kind of tracks that they race on are the exact same tracks I race on. So when they come to Austin, Texas, they race on a track called Circuit of the Americas. I've been racing on that track since it opened up, but I race predominantly sports cars. So for the last 10 years, I raced for Honda and Acura and their NSX, or the Honda Civic Type R. And I've raced everything from Lamborghinis to Ferraris, Porsches, BMWs, and on down the road. So it's kind of like if you have a pilot's license, you can fly a bunch of different types of aircraft once you get ranked up. And it's very similar with racing. The more you do it, the more opportunity you get to do different various stuff. And I've always believed that the best drivers of all time, the names that everybody knows, if they're not in racing, Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, those guys would drive anything, anywhere. And so that's been my goal my whole life, is do anything I can get my hands on, just the experience and for the fun of it.
Yeah. So is it like I'm seriously about to date myself here, but is it like Days of Thunder where they get the rental cars and are driving on the beach? And I mean, do you feel that temptation like every day of your life?
Jason's revealing that he's not only just recently turned 40.
I'm
he's
looking
a few years
forward to
past that.
turning 40 in 10 years. And because
Nice.
of that, I watch a bunch of movies that old people would watch. So
Right.
I'll be prepared for
Bullshit
that.
meters kind of
Anyway,
going
my
off.
age isn't really the subject of the conversation. So moving on.
It's funny you mentioned that. To answer your question, I race in two different sports car leagues predominantly. IMSA, which is one of the biggest premier road racing series on the planet, and another series called SRO America, which are both, it's basically, they're not affiliated with each other, but a lot of the same people do both. It's kind of like the National League and the American League. It's very, very similar.
Gotcha.
A lot of the same rules, a lot of the same cars.
Sure.
Kind of hard to keep up with, but point being, I race in the two predominant sports car racing championships in North America. And absolutely, there are rental car calamities. The days where you can get away with that shit is a lot. It's a lot different now because now they have a easy way to track you,
Sure,
and they tell the
yeah.
other companies to keep an eye out for you. So you don't normally wreck your own car, but you absolutely mess with other people's,
Right.
and the key to rental car calamity is doing something that is easily fixable, but also a real pain in the ass. So first one that comes to mind, very, very simple trick. You go get baby powder and you get a little funnel or you make one out of paper. You fill the vents up in the AC
Oh my
of your
gosh.
buddy's rental car. And then you crank the heat, the car's turned off, but you crank the AC vent fan all the way up. So when they get it and they turn the car on, poof, and over the course of a race weekend, you can get that cleaned up with a shop vac and a rag. But man, it really makes a mess.
Oh man. So are these your competitors that you're giving this gift to, or your teammates, or
Well,
just
you got to be.
whoever comes along?
It's generally anybody dumb enough to give you the key to the rental car because you got to get in there somehow. But you don't do that to your mechanics because you need your mechanics to
Right.
keep you alive and you want them to
Right.
like you.
Yeah.
But if you have a new teammate that's a co-driver, not necessarily somebody that works on your car at all,
Sure.
yeah, you could definitely do a little bit of messing with them. But payback's always double, right? So if you're gonna do this, you got to do it timely. Last race of the year,
Mm.
you're probably not going to see this person for a long time. Maybe they live in Europe, so you know you're not going to run into them for a while. Just got to be smart about it.
Right.
Whole
All right.
strategy behind that.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Now you know you've got insider wisdom on how to haze people that you work with. So keep these things in mind. So Ryan, did you start out with go-karts and that sort of thing?
So racing is a very expensive sport. Even at go-karting levels, there are people that spend millions of dollars on go-kart racing. And as I mentioned before, my dad's a mechanic and they don't normally make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to pay for extracurricular racing activities. So my parents very early on set the bar like, hey, look, if you're going to get in on this, you're going to have to work your way in. We can give you a little bit of a name recognition because my dad had a very good reputation, but there's no money for you to kind of, pull from. So very early on, we did get a go-kart. It was a very small, yard cart that helped me learn how to drive and stuff like that. Went to a couple of events and then I didn't forget about racing. I would go to the races as a fan with my dad. I'm like 10, 11 years old, but kind of picked up paintball and camping and doing other fun high school kind of stuff, or middle school, I should say. And then in my ninth grade year, I finally decided, I'm like, look, I really want to get into racing, really bad. I don't have any money. So my parents made a deal with me. They're like, we'll homeschool you if you get a job in racing, but it's got to be a real job. This can't be you're not getting out of school. You still have to finish your education and things like that. So I reached out to a bunch of teams in the Atlanta area, which is a very popular area for sports car teams to be based. And a guy named Mike Johnson, coincidentally from the Real World London series on MTV.
Huh.
He, former racer, had started his own race team as a team owner. He was the first person to call me back and said, yeah, come on down. I'm 16 years old. I don't know anything other than the little things my dad has taught me. I haven't really traveled too much. And within 2 months, I was at the Daytona 24-hour, which is our Super Bowl. It's the first race of the year, but it's massive. And we won it. And I was a number 3 mechanic, very junior, still trying to figure out which way the track went, And our team won, and it was a really big, awesome opportunity. And I stayed with that program for a couple of years. And the entire time I was saving money, still living at home, still going to homeschool first thing in the morning from 6 a.m. until 9 a.m. and then working for this race team. But I was socking away as much money as I could because I knew I was going to have to pay for my own racing school, which is it's a 3-day, 4-day program, but it's still $4,000. And when you're 16, you don't have $4,000. So saved and saved. And then through Mike Johnson, that team owner, he started doing deals where he's like, look, I'm going to run this race car for a guy. I want to see you get an opportunity. So I took a little bit of a pay cut on it and you're going to get to test it. And just that little bit of experience is how you start building your resume up. And so Mike was a huge help with that starting out. And that's kind of what began it. But to give you the timeline, that was 2000, December of 2000 was my first weekend racing as a mechanic, and I didn't get paid enough to live off of racing until 2010. And
Hmm.
so throughout that time, I found my way into a pro driving situation or working at a racing school as an instructor, but I was still having to do like all these different things to make ends meet. And in 2010, I was successful enough, won a bunch of races and things like that, that I could live solely off of just driving race cars, which, 10-year venture to make that happen. And there was no guarantee that it would work out.
So, um, where did that work ethic, commitment, and passion come from for you?
I think it's instilled from my family. Both of my parents are super hard workers. They don't take no for an answer, and I've never heard them say I can't do that or no, that's impossible. They'll always try to find a way to achieve whatever the goals are. And so it wasn't something that was like burned into me or my sisters as a kid, but it was definitely something that was given to us by example, because my dad came from nothing and was able to work for some really high profile programs, and I get to go to those races and see all of that. It's like, okay. But then also I think it's just that natural inborn desire to succeed when you have a goal like that you really want. And one of my favorite things to do is like listening to podcasts or reading books about people that have achieved success, not necessarily in a fame way, but in a way that they chose. And it just really resonates with me because the amount of people that told me I wouldn't make it or it's impossible, and the odds are absolutely stacked against you in motorsports. It was more often than not, you're wasting your time. Don't do it. Don't do it. And that also fueled me a little bit. But yeah, it was from the way I was raised, as well as just wanting something so badly, I was willing to forego high school social life, skip college, go right into racing, and uh, it's just living on the road basically from 16 years old. So immediately your focus changes and your social status changes with what you normally be doing as a teenager.
Yeah, I think that some people in the audience may need to understand that there's in probably every level of racing, there is a very strong correlation between the budget that the team has and the amount of times that they win. And
Yep.
especially at the lower, more local level, that correlation may be very, very, very direct at a lot of times in a way that is not necessarily ethical, but the amount of ways you can spend money on race cars is infinite. I mean, just absolutely infinite. And no matter what level you're at, there's a way to buy something that's lighter. There's a way to buy something that's better and pay people more money to put it together the right way. And so I mean, even in my very limited like hometown experience, I saw lots of like sort of legacy situations where there's a dad who was a driver or was involved, owned a car or something like that,
Yeah.
and his son comes along and his son ends up being a winner too, and it just so happens that they also have like a shit ton of money to make that
Yeah.
happen. So you weren't handed the direct resources to be successful at what your dad loved. You were given values, you were given knowledge, connections, you were given intangible things. You were given tools to make your own future, and you used them. You spent the commodity that you had at a young age, which is time, to use those
Yeah.
tools to find your success.
Sweat equity. That was my mom's phrase. Even before I got into racing, if I wanted something, we have 30 acres of grass that needs to be mowed. Get your ass out there, cut the grass. Sweat equity. And so that's kind of what I pitched to Mike Johnson when I got that first job. I'm like, look, I'm not trying to make money. I'm trying to get into the sport. I'm trying to grow a career. And a lot of times nowadays, that doesn't seem to be something people are willing to do. Everyone wants instant success, which I get. But my dad's big, you know, the thing that he did the most for me was having a great reputation himself. having strong work ethic. And so when I knock on doors, people are, okay, we'll listen because you're dad's son. But if you don't have money in racing, you have to have talent or you have to have value because it's such an expensive sport just to compete on a mid-level, we're not winning very often, but we're still out here running around. That's still very expensive. So if you can't self-fund it or find the sponsorship to do it, you're going to have value with your work, your performance, your talent, whatever it is. So I'm very grateful that my dad was able to get me a door open or a phone call back. But I'm also grateful that my talent matched because I didn't know if I was any good at this. You know what I mean? Like as a kid, I'm like, I think I'm okay in go-karts, but my talent eventually caught up with my desire. And so I worked and worked and worked on being as good a race car driver as I could without having the resources. But there's a very possible chance that at the end of the day, I could have sucked. Like I could have gotten a car and been like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. This isn't for me. I've spent all this time. And I've seen that happen to some people. And kind of to your point, you mentioned how there'll be a dad that races and then the kid gets into it as well. I've seen kids that have no interest being involved, but their dad or parents have really pushed their interest on them, and you see these kids getting to do this amazing thing and they're miserable by it.
Yeah.
And so it was never like my parents wouldn't have cared if I did anything with my life as long as I was happy and safe and successful, or just trying my best. But racing was like, no, I want this so bad, so I'm going to go after it. But that was never forced on me, and I think that was a good thing because I've seen that behavior from parents that is like so unhealthy to force their dream upon someone else.
Yeah, and so you just described you just described the fact that you were given the opportunity and you had to do your part with the work and the skill development and the dedication over a long period of time. But there's another way that can play out a lot of times in life, which is you can work hard and develop your skills and even have money, but you those things are just getting you primed for the opportunity.
Right.
And if you're not ready to take that opportunity when it comes, it doesn't matter what you're doing. A lot of the times you're putting in so much work in life and you're sacrificing so much just to get opportunity, just to get the chance to do the really hard part of things.
Yeah, when you're 17 and you come up with a plan to leave public school, all your friends, and I'm still friends with these guys, but like all my buddies are like, "What are you doing? You can't leave school." And I'm like, I don't know another way. And racing's a young person's sport, at least to get started. So I'm like, now's my time. If I don't get into this as soon as possible, it might pass me by, and then I'll always wonder if I should have or could have, and that kind of thing. And like every friend of mine and their parents were like, what are you talking about? You can't leave school. You can't go do this in 10th grade. And then, social media started basically when I think I got my first email, my AOL email when I was 13, right? So this is like very early days for that kind of stuff on a everyone has it kind of level. So as I'm going on the road when I'm 16, 17, 18 and growing up in the sport, I'm seeing my friends on social media doing all the fun things that I'd be doing with them. But instead I'm like at a truck stop in Phoenix, filling the rig up with Richard, our truck driver, or, I'm at a race in France or something, which is also really, really cool. But it was really kind of early days. It was like, is this a good idea? Like, am I an idiot for leaving school, doing something totally different than anyone else I know at that time, and hoping it works out. But at the same time, I was so driven by getting involved and being a part of the sport that it was like you couldn't have told me, otherwise. So the only times I'd have those struggles were when I felt like I was missing out, FOMO, which is a real thing. But at the same time, the next morning I'd wake up and I'd go work on a race car, maybe get to drive one or whatever. And it's like, okay, this is the right call, I think. So there's a comedian, Mike Birbiglia, who has this great bit about delusion. And the first time I heard it, I was like, that is so spot on. Because as an early comedian, you're bombing all the time. And you have to convince yourself that it's going well to continue doing it. And I wasn't bombing all the time, but I'm seeing all my friends, going to prom and going to college and going to football games. I'm like, man, I'm not doing any of that. I hope this is a good idea. But the delusion of I'm going to make it one day was so strong that it fueled me until I got to a place where I felt like I did.
Yeah, it's almost like you're believing in something that's not real,
Yeah.
yet. But at the same time, if your heart is really there, if the commitment is real, if the skills, you got to develop the skills.
Mhm.
And if you're taking the necessary steps, then you're making it real. Slowly but surely, day over day, after a period of time, it's not like you flip a switch and there's success. You're building that success in a way that's very much an investment.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is never forget your beginner spirit because it's easy. And I've met people from all walks of life, and I think my job is absolutely unbelievable. Like it's super crazy that I get to drive race cars and people pay me to do it. I mean, I'm one of those people that on a daily basis, like, shh, can you believe I'm doing this? Like, this is ridiculous. But everybody has a bad day, and people can find you can take the coolest job in the world and find somebody that's sick of doing it. And so I've always tried to keep a little bit of a like a little centering, like don't take this for granted, enjoy this for what it is, and try to remember my beginner spirit because day one of my career, you could have been like, set yourself on fire and we'll let you drive a race car. And I'd be like, where's the gasoline? Let's do this. And so then like 10 years later, you're like, man, I hope this works out. You start to kind of get a little bit burnt out because time and everything. And then you get to a point where it's going well. And you can find fault in that, And
Right.
so I always try to think back, like, what would 17-year-old Ryan Eversley think knowing what he gets to do now. And that does, I mean, it sounds corny and cliche, but I don't care. It does actually help me at times where it's a little dark or it's a little burnt out, things like that.
Do you ever think about what 50 or 60-year-old Ryan will think about 40-year-old Ryan?
I do. I was just having a conversation the other day with on my podcast. I was interviewing a guy who's in a huge opportunity right now. Like he is height of his game, big program, racing for one of the best teams in the world. And I said, do you actually stop and think about it? Because I was on a program like that a couple of years ago, and every day that I went into the racetrack, the amount of people that were working for my car to do well, the amount of people at the shop and back at the manufacturer, it was like, this is so crazy to me that like there's 100 or 200 people all dedicated to helping me go do something, which is just, it blows my mind. And so I always try to stop. Like I've got more pictures on my phone of the race cars that I've driven probably than any other driver that I've taken myself. It was because I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening. Like keep experiencing this. So I think one of the things I've done very well in my career is appreciate the moment as it's happening. Specifically, I got to do the NASCAR Cup Series race a couple of years ago, which for me was like totally, that's the biggest thing you could do in North America and racing. Probably the second biggest thing in the world after F1 would be NASCAR. And I didn't, it didn't go well. We were as a team that doesn't run very well, which is, I knew that going in. The car broke about halfway in the race, all good. But I never stopped smiling because I was like, I'm getting to do this. I'm getting to drive a NASCAR Cup Series race against all the top guys, everybody you see on TV, and I didn't embarrass myself. I was competitive with what I had. I left that day literally whistling and singing in the car when I drove out of the track because I never stopped appreciating the moment. And I know people that even though they know it's a one-off, it's not probably going to go well, nothing is in their favor for it to go well, would be pissed that they were just a little bit slower than they thought they could be or whatever. And one of my proudest achievements in my career is that one day when I drove that NASCAR series, that I enjoyed it for everything that it was, and I didn't lose sight of like, man, maybe instead of being 28th, I could have been 27th. Who gives a shit, dude? I'm gonna look back at that at 50 or 60, like you said, and I'm gonna go, that was awesome that I got to do that.
Yeah, and I think you touch on a really important point there because you do something every day where no matter how well prepared you are, no matter how good your team is, no matter how good your skills are, failure is out there in the shadows. A couple pounds of PSI
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, the wrong place, the wrong amount of stress, and there's nothing you can do to prevent it. It's going to come for you and it's going to
Yep.
find you. Like that's got to put a lot of pressure on you when you're out there and it's time to perform.
One of my go-to phrases, because I coach a lot of racers as well, one of my main staples, if I had a 10 commandments of my racing quotes, is once chaos becomes the norm, it's no longer chaos.
Hmm.
And
Nice.
so most people when they ride with me in a race car, that we talk about being smooth and all that kind of thing, but it's violent. It's a violent feeling when you're not in control of something and someone's as aggressive with a car as we are. And so people is like, wow, I didn't expect it to be that like chaotic. And I'm like, well, to me, that's so normal because I do it all the time. But like, just like if you work in a restaurant and the dinner rush comes, if you're the first day on the line, you're like, oh my God, I can't do this. But then like, 6 weeks later, you're like, of course it's the rush. It's 7:30. Let's go. It becomes normal. To your point though, there are days where you do everything right, everything's perfect, and then it rains and you're not on rain tires, or you miscalculate the fuel mileage, or somebody wrecks into you because not because they're a bad driver, because they had a failure. You know what I mean? There's like so many things like that that are out of your hands that if you spend the time focusing on that, you'll never make it. You'll just get so burnt out. So the easiest phrase you'll always hear in racing, and it's applied for the dumbest reason sometimes, but that's racing, where you're out there leading by a mile and there's a yellow, the pace car comes out, picks up the wrong car, then you get sent to the back of the line or whatever. That's racing. You're like, no, but it's not. It's definitely a part of it. There are a lot of days where you have nothing to do, out of your control completely, whether it's weather related. I've seen racetracks come apart, like where the concrete is ripping out of the track because it's getting abused so much. You're like, well, the race is over early. You know what I mean? Or lightning. We don't race in lightning. We race in the rain, but lightning, because there's fans, that can be dangerous to fans. So I've been in races where we were going to stop a little later because we know the storm's going to get worse, and then we'll put the rain tires on. Well, then everybody else stopped before us, or vice versa. We lose the track position, and then it's like, oh, and it's yellow, so the race is over an hour early. You're like, what? Just things like that can be so out of your hands that you kind of just have to relax and let that go, and that's racing.
I imagine that on the flip side of that, so on one side, what you said is everything can be set up perfectly. You can be doing all of your best, and then some small element of chaos comes in and completely throws it all off. I imagine on the flip side, there are opportunities where everything's going wrong, and somehow through God or whatever, like you manage to pull it off and do something that's incredible.
Chaos works in your favor. Chaos gives you a gift.
The first story that comes to mind, I was racing at that track, the F1 track in Austin, COTA, as we call it. This is 2014, and we just were not a good car for the weekend. I think we were seventh. As fast as I could go, we'd be seventh. And we're tied of like 30 cars, but still, it's like every other race we had been top five no matter what. And so on TV, there's a little bit of cloud cover, but not much. And, it's Texas. Things change really quickly there with the weather. And I said on national television, I said, if it stays dry, we are seventh place car. I can't go any faster. The thing just can't go any quicker. If it rains, I think we can win. And literally, as I said it, rain starts falling. And it was like, holy shit. And sure enough, we go on and win the thing from a car that I know in my heart wasn't going to be better than maybe sixth, maybe fifth if somebody wrecks or whatever. But we are not getting there on performance. But in the rain, that car was very good in the rain. And so we went right to the front of the field. And I think we won by like 30 seconds over second and 35 seconds over third. I mean, it was just like a totally different race because of the weather. But like that morning, I got up knowing like today's not going to be our day if everything's as expected. But you don't give up, you go racing anyway, and that worked out. And that was one of the perfect example of like, okay, this is chaotic. I can't see hardly out the windshield, but I got to keep pushing. And we ended up winning a race that I had no idea that we would.
It sounds like those experiences help you to live in the moment. You were talking about that a little bit earlier, of just appreciating in the moment and not being particularly attached to the outcome, because you just don't know what's going to happen, what's going to get thrown at you, what might go right, what might go wrong.
Yeah, in my kind of racing, they do a thing where they try to keep the cars as even as possible through a process called balance of performance. And basically what that means is like if you're racing a Honda Civic and another guy's in a Porsche Cayman, well, the Porsche Cayman's a mid-engine car. It's going to handle a bit better than the Honda. So what they try to do is give the Honda either a little bit more gas so it can go farther, or a little bit more straight line speed to make up the handling difference. And they try to make all these cars that are very different be as competitive as possible. It's a thankless job, and it's very difficult. But the reality is that there are days where I show up to the racetrack knowing I cannot win today. My car is outgunned. The BOP is a little off. It's just not going to be my day. And if I give up or go home, maybe I'm not going to win if it rains, and it's easy to bitch about. It's very, very political now, like with drivers and fans, everybody like, oh, the BOP this, the BOP that. But there are days where I show up going like, all right, maybe I can get on the podium. Maybe we get a trophy and things all go our way, and it goes better than expected. So that's kind of part of racing, that's kind of part of like, there's no guarantees in anything, and it's still a sport at the end of the day. So maybe you outthink somebody, you outdrive somebody, or the conditions turn to your favor. So yeah, you can't give up.
We I think that what we see these days in our society, there's this huge shift, particularly for young people, to want to be social media stars. Everybody wants to be a YouTube influencer,
Yeah.
and in a lot of ways, I mean, there are a lot of reasons to be motivated for that. But I think for a lot of people, there's this it's like it's attainable glory. You can be center stage, you can be the person everybody's paying attention to, and it's become like a lot of instant gratification. It's become fairly shallow through social media, but there are probably people listening to this, particularly with our audience, because I see in Instagram every day, I see people who are vying for this, and the way they comment, the way they reply to people, I can see them trying to grow their accounts. I can see
Yeah.
their influencer content. You can almost read it like a code these days. But so you do something professionally that is, at least in American culture, it is iconic of glory. Like it's literally an icon of a race car driver in a suit holding a big cup in one hand with champagne, pouring out of the other hand. You show that picture and people are going to think glory, champion. And your what you're describing is like, um, in order to seek that, in order to pursue it, you have to make the sacrifice that you may face abysmal failure.
Yeah.
I mean, your life is probably in your hands quite a bit of the time. I'm sure it's a lot safer than it used to be, but
Yeah.
still. And so like there's a balance between that. It's this ultimate glory, but also defeat comes very, very hard and very, very fast. And that's a place you got to be in your head if you have to be willing to accept that if you're gonna make that pursuit. And it's not for the
Yeah.
faint of heart.
Yeah, the social media thing, uh, I can only speak to my own because it's mine. My one, I don't like watching social media and seeing bragging or like, look how much better I am than you. And I don't know that anybody does, but I've always tried to maintain the idea that I'm posting because I can't believe I'm getting to do this shit either. Whether that's being on someone's awesome boat that I met through racing, whether that's getting to fly private to an event that I don't normally get to do. Anytime I'm posting stuff like that, if someone said to me like, you're just showing off, I would be disappointed in myself. My whole attitude is like, you believe this shit? I'm getting to drive this car. Like, come, you're coming with me. You're going to come see this with me, right? Like, that's how I try to use my social media in terms of racing. And what's funny is that like I was just having this conversation the other day with somebody. Like, they have a very high stress, high pressure job in advertising, and my failures, their failures are brought up to them in a boardroom or in front of employees. My failures are not only brought up to me by my teammates or my team owner or whatever, they're also broadcast on television, on social media. It can be a reel, it can be a loop, it could be a GIF. And so you have to kind of get over that pretty quickly, that if you do something stupid, it's going to be your name on the highlight, like right there, like, oh, we got a car on the wall. Oh, and it's Ryan Eversley. Oh, that's terrible. You just have to kind of say that's part of the job. But at the same time, I get to hold trophies up and drive cool cars and things like that. So, give and a take. But it is to kind of put it the way I've been dealing with things. So for a long time, I didn't know if I was good enough to be in the sport. I didn't know if I was just making it, getting by or whatever. And then 2018, I was fortunate enough to win a championship, which is all I ever wanted to do in racing. And I wanted to win against tough competition. And when I did that, it really softened a lot of edges in my life and helped me remember at the end of the day, I definitely belong here. I definitely am doing the best that I can do amongst the best in the world. And that's important to me. I don't think I'm better than everybody else that I raced against. I think if you're at the top of your game, it's just like ebbs and flows on who's the best that particular day or that time or in that car or whatever it is. And I know people that are like, no, I'm better than everybody. And I'm like, maybe that's what you have to do to motivate yourself, but I don't operate that way. Like I'm going to get the most out of myself and the car I'm driving or the team I'm working with every chance I get. But if I walk around thinking I'm better than everybody and I start using my social media in that direction, I think I would lose my fan base very quickly because it would be disingenuous and also, annoying. It would just be something like, oh, this guy's an ass. So that's kind of I'm one speed. Like the conversation we're having right now is the same conversation I've had with millions. That's ridiculous. Thousands of fans, or my neighbors. I'm the same person all the time, and I think that resonates with people as well.
Yeah, well, you're clearly a person who's motivated by passion, but it's a passion that's been channeled into your goals. You knew what you wanted. You were deeply passionate about it, but you had the self-control to take the steps to get there as opposed to just sort of being a total nut about it all the time,
Yeah.
And I think that's also that takes in the world of social media, that takes a lot of effort to not give in to inflammatory trends and
Mhm.
to not put that very superficial experience at the forefront of your personal brand. You put your passion at the forefront of your personal brand, and that's probably endearing to way more people than if you were out there, being an ass.
Yeah, I've pulled back a lot on social media, and everybody has a bad day. I'm definitely guilty of writing shit on people's posts that I'm like, what am I doing? Or deleting it later, or getting frustrated by something, or jealous. You know, I started going to therapy about 7 or 8 years ago, and just like kind of like, why not? I felt fine. Everything seemed great. And I learned things very quickly, not just about myself, but about others. And the biggest thing in racing, there's a lot of this, but ego is so crazy. You know what I mean? Like you'll be looking at somebody that you like, looking at their post, and they've had something good happen to them, and you immediately you're like, why not me? Instead
Yeah.
of, hey, that's awesome for that person. They're a good person. They deserve the success. And so I had to start realizing that there's a difference between, uh, you know, being happy for someone or uh, my ego allowing me to be happy for someone. Like, oh, good for them versus no, that is actually good for them. That's great. They deserve it. And those things have changed my life dramatically because I think in the past, one of the ways I would motivate myself was to be like, I can do better than that. Or I can be that if that person can do that, I can do that. And instead, it's like now for me, I'll use someone else's success. Like, that's cool. I should continue to push myself forward. I should continue to do the best job I can. But it took a while and a lot of therapy to get to a point where it's like genuinely happy for other people's success. Because in my sport, if someone's winning, that means you're losing.
Right.
If someone else is having new opportunity, that means I'm not getting it. And so you have to kind of balance proper motivation, checking your ego at the door, and also, just trying to remember that we're not curing cancer. Everything I'm doing with racing is fun and games. It's not real.
Right.
So we need to enjoy this as much as possible. Be as good of an advocate for the brands I represent or the fans that follow me. And that's kind of my social media is like. Lately, I've pulled back a lot just because it's got so negative. Like you can post a picture of a Porsche, it says Porsche, and someone else that's a Ferrari, and you're like, okay, I give up. You know what I mean? But there's still people that I've met through social media that I consider personal friends now that I never would have otherwise. I've got fans all over the world now, and that's real. That I can't. I never would have gotten that if it wasn't for social media. So there's good and bad to it. I think if you step back from it quite a bit, which has been helpful, don't get so wrapped up in it, it becomes a lot more valuable of a tool for you.
Yeah, well, it's a really common theme for people to discuss social media these days and talk about the I can't remember the exact expression, but like comparison is the thief of joy or something
Yeah,
like that. And
yeah,
so a lot of people talk about one of the ways that social media has a negative impact on their lives is that they compare themselves to other people, which is like,
yeah.
competition. But you're a professional competitor. That's how you make a living for yourself, is you go out there and you step up next to somebody else, and one of you wins and one of you doesn't, or probably one of you wins and a whole bunch of others don't.
Yeah.
And so that's, can you talk about a little bit, like competition in general, like healthy competition, how to be in the right place in your head when you're competing and not be self-defeating with that sort of negativity?
Yeah, that's easy. That's an easy trap to catch yourself in, if you're not a bit more realistic. And I think one of the things I learned early on in my driving career was you have to know when it's not your day. I've watched drivers crash cars trying to keep up with other cars when it's like you're not going to win today. You have to know that today's a fourth place day. And the drivers that understand that, and I'm sure this is with other competitors where they're racing or up against other people, you have to know when it's your day to win and when it's your day to settle for third and keep the car and yourself in one piece, because what we're doing is inherently dangerous. Um, one of my one of my takeaways in racing, I have two very close friends, Spencer Pompelli and Andy Lally. They're both tremendous race car drivers and great people. And they're both completely different in how they go about their competitive natures, but yet they're both at the top of their game. And if you put them in the same car, which they do drive together from time to time, it's like identical, the results. You know what I mean? But personality wise, one of them doesn't care about racing cars at all, just cares about competition. If he hadn't found racing, he would have found something else, and that would have been his desire. Whereas the other one really enjoys the car aspect of it, understands the mechanical abilities of a car. And so my point is that I'm somewhere kind of in the middle, and all three of us are doing this for a living. So it's not necessary that you're going to get the same personality types or the same competition in people individually. But once you're out there and you're competing, that's like the end all be all. We always say once the helmet goes on, the brain turns off, or drivers get red mist, things like that. Absolutely. But the best guys are the ones that know, okay, today's the day I'm finishing third or fourth, and I'm gonna keep the car in one piece. I'm not gonna cost somebody $1 million. I'm not going to the hospital. Like, today's not my day. And there are guys that are the fastest guys in the world. Like nobody can beat them on one lap, but half the time they're in the fence because they don't know when to just turn off the competition a little bit, back it down, and save it for another day. And so I think that's the difference between good drivers and great drivers. And I just want to be somewhere somewhere in there. But it's the overall is that no two people are the same when it comes to competition. How you motivate yourself, how you get your results out of yourself. It seems so different to me.
Yeah, well, it's necessary if you develop your strength, no matter what it is you're doing in life. If you're putting this work into getting stronger and getting better, it's completely useless if you can't refine your strength. If you can't wield it in the right way at the right time, and a lot of times that means reserving your strength just because you're strong enough to make a big, heavy, harsh movement. Sometimes you need to make a little small movement. And again, whatever it is you're trying to do, those moments are going to occur, and you've got to develop experience and wisdom and be able to be observant in order to pull that off. And if you can't do that, then you're going to be really self-destructive, and you're probably going to not have a very high opinion of yourself over time.
So you guys post a lot about uh, self motivation and reasons to do things and how to be successful. And like I went through your website, a couple months ago when you guys reached out, and one of the biggest things we preach on my show, and when we talk to other racers, one of the biggest things I preach to young drivers or new racers is you have to be likable. You get so
Yeah.
much further in life if you're a joy to be around, if you're pleasurable to work with. And just like I know guys that are the fastest guys for one lap and they're in the fence on the next one, I know drivers that are the fastest you'll ever see, but no one wants to go to dinner with them. And if they don't want to go
Mhm.
to dinner with them, they're not going to spend a year racing with them. Or
Right.
your team owner is not going to spend $1 million on you when he knows he has to spend how many airport trips with you, how many dinners, how many team meetings, and you're just a miserable prick to be around. You're not going to keep that ride, even if you're the fastest guy in the world. So I've always tried to keep that in mind. Like, I mean, I want to have fun all the time. I want to laugh and carry on all the time. But I also need to be serious in my workplace. That doesn't mean you can't be enjoyable to be around. And I've worked with people who are my teammates at times. Like we're both trying to get the same result for the same group of people, and they're just so hell bent on being difficult or establishing themselves as a leader that they lose sight of the overall picture. And it wasn't about talent; it was about personality and how they mix. And with racing, there's no single race team. Like there's no one person race team. You've got to have a crew. You've got to have sponsors. You got to have all these things that make this possible. If you're difficult and not good to be around, take the talent away from it. Like take the on track stuff. I always say that's the easiest part. Driving the race car is probably the most pleasurable because I can kind of turn everything off. I've already made it on track. Everything's done. Now I can just do the one thing I want to do. It's all the stuff that goes behind it that if you're not willing to be a teammate, if you're not willing to be agreeable at times where it might be better to, just let someone else have their way, you'll find out it's a lot harder to get ahead, I think, in any position, like in any sport.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely true. I mean, even if you want to take it to the corporate level or whatever, a lot of my background in early GFDA and before, working with design agencies and studios and the like, and even in research I did for my graduate thesis, one of the things that came up often was like, talent is important, but that through that interview process or even the first year of employment, like studios can have the most talented people, but if nobody can bear to be around them, then it's just like it's not going to work. And that's also, in some of the work that we do with culture and corporations, and we go in and we work with people, that's kind of a key learning, is just getting people to understand that, it's drive's important, but, where's the team player? Because that sort of trickle down effect that one negative person can have, like on the whole, the whole company, is profound.
I think there's another side to it too, where, so we have a post that's, be fucking nice. Right. And
Yeah.
sure enough, every time we post it, somebody's like, I tried being nice and it never works. And one time somebody posted, I tried being nice, but people treated me like a doormat. And I didn't reply. I wasn't quite quick enough at the time. But my response to that is, if people are treating you like a doormat, it's not because you're being nice, it's because you're being a doormat. And that's part of that idea that's got to be there, is refinement. Like you've got to develop your skills. You got to develop your own confidence. You've got to know what you're there for. You got to know why you're there. You got to know what your own value is. You got to know what your part of the team is, what your role is. The being nice part is just getting through the day. It's just, you guys are on, like, if no matter what kind of team you're a part of, you're there to accomplish some task, to take some journey. You're stuck together. It's going to go so much better, so much smoother, so much faster if you keep your damn mouth shut most of the time. Easier for some people than others, right? But if you keep your mouth shut most of the time, and when you do open it, just say whatever is going to kind of get us through the moment, and then bring your game when the time comes.
Yeah.
When you need to speak up, speak up. When you do have the insight, apply it.
When you work with a really good team, and not necessarily a good, like, not, maybe they're not the most successful team, but when everybody on that program understand each other for who they are, you get so much more accomplished, because you don't have to worry about upsetting people or saying something that they're going to misinterpret, because they already kind of know what you're getting at, and that you're in this together. So my current team, Performance Racing LA, my team manager, his name's Daniel Martin. We call him Race Dad because a lot of the guys on our team when we started were new to racing, and I wasn't, but I thought it was adorable. So I'm going to continue calling him Race Dad till I die. So, but Race Dad and I, we have said things to each other in the last like 2 or 3 years where, as it left my mouth, I was like, man, I'm glad I'm saying it to him, because I know he's going to take it the right way, which is like, we need to do this right now. This is very important. Whereas some people, if they don't know you or they don't have a good working rapport with you, they'll stop what they're doing in the moment, forget the bigger picture, like, don't talk to me that way, or I know that. But when you work with somebody, when you work with a team and everybody understands each other because you were nice when you needed to be, and because you set good boundaries and just be professional, you get to a point where you don't have to sugarcoat everything. You don't have to be so concerned about saying the perfect right word, because everybody knows the goal is the same for everyone. So I don't have to be so concerned about being, I'm not saying not nice, but like sugarcoating something, or like if a car I'm driving is a pile of shit at the moment, it's not someone's fault. It just means we need to make it better, and I need to explain that to you as quickly as possible. So I'm not going to say, well, it's not so bad, and no, it's like, hey, this thing's a pile of shit. Here's what I would do. What do you think? How can we fix it? And when you work with good people, and I'm obviously speaking from the racing standpoint, but when you're working with good people in racing, they hear that and they go, we got to make a fix right now. Like
Right.
he's upset. We got to fix this. Versus, oh, well, we worked really hard on making that piece of shit, and it turns into a thing.
Yeah.
So obviously, I couldn't act and say things like that on day one because they don't know me yet. But once you gel and you get to a good point where you're understanding that the person I'm talking to, their whole goal is the same as my whole goal. So whatever they're saying is what they need to get to that point. How can I work with them versus making it about me, being sensitive in a time that doesn't need to be done? And those are hard things to put together, because people are so different, and some people are sensitive to things that others aren't. So I think the best guys I've worked with in racing are the ones that, and I take this out of racing and life, are the ones that take you for you, don't take things personal when things get, high pressure, and are willing to work together versus willing to work for themselves. And in racing, that's very common that like someone wants to be the hero. They want to be, the superstar, whatever. And you can't do anything by yourself in the sport. So you need superstars backing you to be one yourself. And I think the best people, and this is not just drivers, this is crew chiefs, this is people in the media, the ones that work with who they have around them to get to where they want to go, those are the successful ones. It's very rare in my industry, at least, where it's like, this guy's the biggest douchebag we've ever met, but man, does everybody love working with him. It's like, no, it's like, you might be intimidating or you might be very intense, but you're still going to work well with people. Otherwise, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, well, what you're describing is respect, and it's
yeah, exactly. Yep.
You earn respect by being really good at what you do, but also by showing respect to people who are also good at what they do. You have to have when you're a part of a high performing team, you have to keep two things in mind almost all the time. The first is the goal that you're working towards together, and the second one is the capacity and the competency of everybody else on your team, and you got to trust it. And everybody's got to trust each other. And when you're in that place, speaking directly and as quickly and clearly as possible to other people to get to that goal, they're going to respect you more. You're helping them work better, and that's what they need.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was on my team and my partner on my show, Sean Heckman. They have both heard me say the phrase, "I'm just saying this to hear myself say it," because I know how many times I've forgotten to like put my earplugs in or something dumb like that. And you're like, Jesus, didn't tie my shoe. So I'll say things on a regular basis like, hey, did we do this thing? I'm just saying it so I know I've said it. And they're like, yeah, we've done that thing. And I'd say like maybe I say that 10 times a weekend, and once or twice a weekend it's like, glad you said something. Right. Versus being like, why didn't you do that? Should I have to tell you that stuff? It's like, no. We're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get overloaded with work or whatever it is. If I'm starting out the conversation, not in an accusatory way, but in a, hey, I know I would do this. Have you guys thought about this? It goes so much further than waiting for something to go wrong because you didn't want to say anything. Yeah, and then being like, well, you should have known better. And so when there's so much on the line in motorsports, you're doing a good job if you are checking everything that you can, but to the right amount of pressure you're putting on your team. If I'm just overbearing them all the time, like, did you do this thing? Did you do this thing? They're like, dude, we got it. But again, like you said, the respect on my program right now is tremendous. So my guys know I'm only saying that because I want to see us go to the front and win this race versus just to be right or argumentative or like, haha, I told you so. And so once that respect is built in a program, it's almost unstoppable.
Yeah, we've worked with some really high performing teams in our corporate workshop. This got a lot to do with like making high performing teams work even better, right? And so we've worked with like super high performers at major household brands that
Yeah.
everybody in the world knows this brand. And one of the things that we will see, we will see a lot of times, like two sides of this coin where you've got leadership who is somebody or a group of people who are really good at what they do, but they got like a problem. They can't trust
Hmm.
other people to do what they're supposed to
Yeah.
do. And so they are constantly in everybody else's shit all the time when they shouldn't be. It's bad for them. It's wasting their time, wasting other people's time. And but and it's making people perform less well, but
Yeah.
they're compelled to do it. The other side of the coin is you have people who have skills and have abilities, but they keep their mouth shut at the wrong time. You
Right.
know, they're not willing to listen to that voice inside their head that says, hey, this is a thing. Nobody else, I don't think anybody else sees this. You don't know, but I don't
Hmm.
think anybody
Hmm.
else sees this right now. But I don't know. I don't want to say anything, you know. And like part of our job when we're training these people is finding the middle ground between
Hmm.
there. It's like
Hmm.
establishing that trust, both that the people you work with they have their jobs for a reason, they're competent, they got your back, they can handle what they need to handle. But the other side of it is you have to trust them that they trust you.
Yeah.
You have to trust them that they expect you to say what needs to be said and play your part. And that's not when something's going 200 miles an hour and
Right.
people's lives are in their hands. And it's still a challenge every single day.
How much of that do you guys come across where it's someone not really knowing the other person, so they're not willing to give them control or take them at face value? Because in my experience, some of the people that I was like that with, it was because I only knew them at work. I didn't ever go have a beer with them or sit down for a meal with them. And then once I did, and I kind of understood their personality a bit better, or I could see their mannerisms and know that they're doing a good job, they're doing the best they can, there might just be a little different from me. That has gone so far with me that now anytime I'm like talking to somebody or I'm competing against somebody and I'm like not a fan, I then think, you know what, I bet if I went and had dinner with them tonight, I'd probably be like, you're all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we definitely see that, and the other, I don't know, maybe half of that is if you don't know yourself. And so where you may have like specific hangups where you make assumptions about the other person or whatever, it's like it's a combination of both, of like knowing yourself, knowing just like maybe you naturally gravitate towards something that's negative opinions or whatever about people, but then also like getting to know the other person and developing that rapport and trying to find that balance.
Yeah, it's something that we actually address directly. And you're totally right that like everything that we try to do as a brand is about the human being. It's about
Yeah.
looking at another person and realizing like they're going through a bunch of the same shit you're going through.
Yeah.
Every day
Yeah.
they wake up, they're scared of something, they want something, they need to be loved, they need to be
Yep.
understood. I mean, these are like this is the human experience since the beginning of recorded history, right?
Yeah.
So when one of the ways we address it though, like we you're so on point with that let's get a beer together mentality, that when you're out of your persona for your job,
Hmm.
you've sort of taken the rules of how you interact in a certain environment, you set those aside for a minute and you're communicating like person to person, and that's when so much shit gets resolved even if it's unspoken.
Yep.
It's just looking people in the eye and being relaxed. You know so much about a person when you've
Hmm.
just gone through that. So we have to we have to manufacture that in a way that people don't know what's happening to them.
Yeah.
And so, because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if we start out by saying, okay, well, right now we're going to look each other in the eye and we're going to
Right.
communicate with like it would be terrible and everybody would
Yeah.
hate it and it'd be really
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
It'd be a
So we
chore. Yep.
right, so we give them a challenge that makes them like do some super weird but fun and like mysteriously difficult things to do,
Yeah.
where we've engineered it and we've done a lot of research and we know that like in order to accomplish this task together, you're going to have an ego conflict. Like
Yeah.
you're both going to want to know what the right answer is, and then you're going to fail if you stick with that. But if you sit down, instead of knowing what the right answer is, you break things down like what you actually have to work with and what you actually have to do, then you're going to succeed. Then we build up to something else where it's like you're about to do some like batshit crazy, ridiculous thing together where your gut's going to tell you to be embarrassed about what you're doing. But, you're going to look at this person you've just built this trust with after accomplishing this other task together.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to say, no, I'm not embarrassed because they got my back. And then
Yeah.
you have like a partner in crime,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's really hard to do, but over the years we've learned to like condense, like what I just described is basically work life versus, after work drinks. And
Mm-hmm.
we've learned over the years to like distill that into
Mm-hmm.
this, like in a couple of hours and making it happen. So that was really good insight. Like that's like a major part of what we do.
So my podcast and my TV show is different, but basically the podcast, the whole premise of all of it is the name is Dinner with Racers. The whole point of it is, what is it like to go have a meal with that person? It's not a tell me about this race last week or play. And half the time we don't even talk about racing, more about the people around them and stuff like that. And there have been people on that show that I had zero interest going to dinner with because I compete against them or I've just heard enough stories. And I'm like, fine, if a fan wants it, sure, but I'm not going to be really excited about this. And every time, every single time I've left going, I get it. That's a good guy. Or she's got her shit. Okay, I get it. It's like it's always, and obviously it doesn't mean me and that person are best friends or whatever, but now there's a respect there and an understanding of like that person is that way because of that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Doesn't mean that they're better or worse than me. They're how they are. But it always comes down to me. It's always come down to like knowing them for who they are versus how I perceive them in this one setting that is probably pretty specific. You know what I mean? Like they're a great tire changer. Don't know anything else about them after that. It's like, well, maybe they're also a great person. Maybe they're creative or artistic or whatever, And so I've always, because I started as a mechanic myself, and I remember when I was 17, when drivers would come talk to me, even though I'm just a little pissant mechanic, it meant a lot to me. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
man, I matter. Awesome, And so I still, to this day, the first thing I do every morning at the racetrack is go shake hands with everybody that's there. Even if I'm new to the team and I'm like, I think that guy's name is this, or I think her name is this, I still go, hey, good morning. How are you? Just to put some time in so they know I give a shit. And then I have more handshakes and high fives and random one-liners with all my guys. And one of my favorite shows is Hard Knocks on HBO, which is preseason NFL. And you don't have to be a football fan to like it. It's about the people. It's about them and how they are. And you watch all these like really good quarterbacks. They know something about all of their receivers. They've got inside jokes with all their people. And I think that comfort builds more trust, more respect, and more teamwork, because you like the person you're working with, you want to do right by them. And I mean from my side to them. Like if I crash a car, I feel horrible that my man Carlos is going to have to put it back together.
Right.
You know what I mean? Race Dad's going to have to get on the parts truck and buy a bunch of parts. Mario, my team owner's going to have to pay for it. That eats me up inside. So that drives me to do better. Whereas if they were just a bunch of people that are hiring me to do something and I don't really have any relationship with them other than that, I'm not going to go be reckless, but it's going to probably be obvious if I make a mistake that I don't care as much.
Right.
And so that's going to make them care less, and now we're already in a bad situation. So yeah, knowing the people you work with beyond just how you work with them, I think is super critical, at least in a competitive environment that I'm speaking to, because then you understand what makes them tick. You understand why they'd be upset or why they're not as excited about today's project versus this one. And once you have that human element and that understanding, it's such a much more pleasurable experience because you care about the person versus just whatever the task is at hand that you have to do with that person.
I think that ties back into the idea of respect and is also, our goal with the podcast is people are so much more than that single thing that you may interact with them about. So there's so much more than that one social media post about some political thing that you don't agree with. There's so much more than the one task that they do in their job that maybe that's all you see. People are multifaceted. And so when you take the opportunity to have the respect for the humanity of the people that surround you and to learn about all the different parts about them and what makes them tick, then it becomes so much easier to have that respect and to develop those relationships and to be understanding, see where people come from.
I have a story about this, and I don't want to say their name because I don't want to out their politics or anything. But just probably like 6, 7 years ago, I was driving for a race team, and the owner of the team has a very good friend who also races, who is very specific about his political outtakes on social media, to the point where, and I'm not really into politics at all. I think now everybody has to be because of how crazy the world is. But this was to the point where every time I'd open up Facebook or Twitter, it'd be like just rants about this stuff. And so I just replied simply like, why don't you like go out for this? Like, why don't you get into politics? You're so passionate. Why not do this? And he took it as me being like, I disagree with you, which I was literally just saying like, this is wasted time right here, man.
Right.
Wasted energy.
Yeah.
Like if you're this passionate, go do something. So it turned into a bit of a back and forth. Well, fast forward, and at no point was I like, I disagree with your politics, mine or this way. The entire time I'm like, look, dude, I don't care what you do. I'm just saying all I'm seeing are all these rants. Seems like you'd be good at politics. You're just into it. He didn't like that. All good. Fast forward to like 2 months later, there's this massive dinner that they do at the Long Beach Grand Prix, the Road Racer Drivers Club. I get invited. My boss invites me. And he also invites this guy who I haven't seen since this back and forth on social media. And I sat down, he sat down. I was like, oh man, like I'm trying to think of the things I might have said. And I'm like playing it through my head. We had the best dinner. We had the best dinner. We had drinks. Politics never came up once. There were chances for it too, and it didn't. And it was one of those eye-opening things where I'm like, what you see on social media isn't necessarily real. And yes, some people use it as a vent, and some people are toxic on it and horrible and all that. And other people are just using it as like a rant venting tool. And then they go about their day and they're just a normal human being.
Right.
And I sat at this dinner for like 3 hours sweating for the first hour until hour two. I'm like, oh, he's cool. We're cool. And we had a great time. And I still see this guy and talk to him like every chance I get because we get along really, really well. But politically, we couldn't be more different. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And I think, and I know this is like so cliche to keep bringing this up, but I think social media has really done us a disservice of being like, I don't agree with you, therefore I don't like you. And
Right.
that's not the real world. Like the more you travel outside of the country, the more you feel that way because you're like, okay, people are people. Everyone's got their problems. Everyone's trying to do the best they can. So, yeah, that was my takeaway from the political what you see versus what's real.
Yeah. And so social media, it, it gives people the appearance that they are boiled down to like three
Yeah,
subjects.
yeah,
And humanity. One thing I tell people a lot, and I've told this to a lot of students in the past, is when you're thinking about somebody else, realize, stop and say, like, stop and think about how complicated you are inside.
yeah,
When you have to make a decision, when you're worried about something, when there's something you want to happen you don't know about, think about how complicated your thoughts and feelings are. Like, they're going through that too.
yeah.
Every hour of every day of their whole lives, that's what they're going through. There's this quote, it's from, I think it's from James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son, but I think he's quoting somebody else. But anyway, that's where I read it. So the quote is, thou knowest this man's fall, but thou knowest not his wrestling. And the point of that quote is that's like, it's so easy to look out and see the end result of where somebody's gotten to in life, but
Hmm.
you can't just look at them and see the story that got them there. And
Yeah,
it kind of goes back to the idea even of sitting there and having the beer with somebody and getting below that surface. Now, there are a lot of people who just got kind of like gruff personalities, but
sure.
there are a lot of people who've been through some shit in this world.
Yeah,
And sometimes when you go through shit in this world, you're not too open to letting other people into your lives. And there you can't, you got to get to that place with people sometimes, particularly if it's somebody you got to work with or it's somebody
hmm,
who's a part of your life. You got to be willing to like look at how they got to where they are. And sometimes if you're willing to extend that, if you're willing to sit down and show somebody that you do have a
hmm,
little bit of interest in them or you do have some
hmm.
compassion for them, you'd be amazed at how much you can change your relationship with somebody with that simple gesture.
Yeah, I get put into a lot of positions where I'm like, I get brought in as like as a fill-in driver, or I'm brought into a program as this is very common with race car drivers where it's like, hey, we got an open seat this weekend. Can you come do this? And you're like, yeah. And you show up and you don't know any of these people here other than your reputation and theirs, and maybe not any of that either. Like, I don't know these guys, I don't know anything about them. And I've been on those programs where you get a very quick vibe that like you're the asshole filling in for our favorite guy.
Yeah.
We're not here for you.
You're
We're
not our
only,
real dad.
you're not my dad. Yeah, exactly. So so I have to like endear myself to this team quickly, and it's exactly what you just said. I find that if I show them the interest that I would want shown in me, it generally goes pretty well. I like, obviously based on this conversation, I like to talk. So I'm always asking, where are you from? Okay, what's a way that we can connect? Like, you're from a town very close to this town I went to test race cars my whole life in Kershaw. So it's like, oh, we're kind of from the same area. I get it.
Right.
Okay, cool. But now I know that about you. I'm going to use that over and over again as a way to build that bridge. So if like later on, I'll be like, well, you South Carolina guys are always slow on the tire changes, but I won't give it to, or something like that, just like build that little bit of rapport. And if you're ever put in a situation where you're working with strangers, I think that's the easiest way to do it, is through a little bit of like, let me get to know you as quick as I can. How about a little compassion? How about a little sense of humor? And let's do the best we can. And like you said, there are people that are hurt or been hurt or don't have time to warm up to you, because it takes them more than that. You have to recognize that too and be like, all right, maybe that person's just that way, and that's all good. Let them be their way, and just try to get the best you can out of the situation.
Yeah, and you don't have to like get in anybody's business. You don't have to
Right.
be their best friend. You don't have to be their therapist. What you got to do is you got to find the path to success with that person if you're in a professional situation with them. And you got to be willing to do your part at every time. But it's really interesting. So in a previous episode we interviewed Eric Kennard, who's an Olympic gold medalist for the high jump. And I was so interested in the fact that even though he's like ultra high performing athlete, literally best of the best athlete at what he does in the world, so much of his job is intellectual. So much of his job is knowledge based, and it's the way he's thinking, because he's at a level of performance where the difference between best and second best is very, very thin. And so the edge has to come from somewhere besides like the muscles in his body, right? And that's similar to what you're describing. You describe about your job, so much of it is because it's team oriented, and because that team has got a lot of like stratification in it, owner to that 16, 17-year-old kid who got the lucky break and is going and grabbing wrenches or whatever. There's so much of what you do has to be like personal. It's got to be a little sociology. It's got to be a little politicking. It's a very, very it's a very personal experience. It's not just a sport.
I honestly, it's been it's been one of my strong suits, is being able to get along. Like, my mom always use that phrase because she's the same way, like never met a stranger. And so I've tried to practice that in life anyway, just because, better way to be. But I had a kid, I won't say his name. He's a good dude. He was just, I think, a little jealous at the time, but he said to me, this is like 2012 or something. And my career has grown quite a bit since then. But at that point, still doing, I was stoked, I was super happy. And he said to me, the only reason you're getting all these opportunities is because your personality. And I said, sweet. Awesome.
Yeah, you're born with that.
I'll take that. Yeah, I was like, I don't think that's how you thought I was going to take that, but I will. Because like we were saying, if the team owner doesn't want to go to dinner with you, you're probably not getting that job. If your crew guys don't appreciate you caring about them, they're not going to do the extra little tiny bits that can make the difference. And honestly, like, what I'm getting to do for my career is outrageous. I mean, it's a crazy way to make a living. I need to enjoy this. Like, I worked at this racing school for a long time when I was trying to get my career started. And we used to always say to the clients, like, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong, because they're paying to come drive race cars. Well, I'm getting paid to drive race cars. So if I'm not having fun, like, this has gone completely backwards,
right.
So I try to keep it as lighthearted and fun as possible, even though it's a serious thing and it has a lot of pressure on you. But almost always that's the better weekend when it's fun, or you're working with a crew that you really like, or you have an owner that appreciates you and respects you and treats you that way, you always get better results with that program than the gruff people that are just don't have any time for anything other than working on a race car and going to drink beer or whatever it is, and that's fine if that's how you are. But the team that like goes to dinner because they want to go to dinner, that team
Right.
does well. Like one of
Right.
the best teams I ever went I raced for, real time racing. I haven't driven for them since 2017. And right before I got on with you guys, the team manager called me just to catch up. Like
Nice.
that's how good that team is. But we would do a Christmas party. They're from Wisconsin. This is like a 1950s bowling alley. We're talking like this team has people from all over the North America. Everyone's flying in for this Christmas party just because it was that close into the team. And that team is the most successful team I've ever worked with and probably will be in the sport. And it's that overall chemistry, that atmosphere of like, we're doing this together. We are going to have as much fun as we can, but we're also going to kick as much ass as possible. Those teams are always the best ones to be on.
Yeah, what you're describing is camaraderie.
Yeah.
And there's a line where at one moment you're going out and you're doing a difficult thing because you want to accomplish that difficult thing, but then you can cross a line when you're with the right group of people,
Mm-hmm.
where you're doing that thing because you're getting this rush from it working, and from
Mm-hmm.
the guy next to you or the gal next to you. It's like you're getting a rush from the success that the other people you're with are having.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a different feeling. You're not thinking about whether you're winning or losing, or whether you're getting to your goal or making your money or whatever you're doing. You're just thinking, in this exact moment, it feels so good that this is working and I trust them and everything's going the right way. And camaraderie, you can't buy camaraderie.
Absolutely. Like a program like that, or the one I'm on now, it's one of those things where it's like I'm half the time I'm not as concerned with my competition as I am with doing a good job for my team. And I think that goes both ways. Whereas like my crew guys are like, I really want to do this right for Ryan because he's out there risking his life and driving as fast as he can. And then the vice versa. I'm like, I really don't want to make a mistake, and I really don't want to do something to get us a penalty or a wreck or whatever, because I want to do good for my guys. And those teams don't have to have competition. They will rise to the top of whatever they're doing because of the internal push, and that's, like you said, that's camaraderie. You watch or you read books about like the Band of Brothers, for example, set in World War II. The amount of camaraderie the Easy Company had for each other was insane, just like next level. And the things that those guys are able to accomplish because of that is sometimes unhuman, and I get to experience a little tiny piece of that with the camaraderie that I get through racing, and it's intoxicating.
Yeah, there's something about, because we talked earlier about how there's any number of things that could go wrong that would prevent you from having great success. And the thing is if your primary focus is on success, then you can't address all of the little things that come up. But what is possible is all of these small components, all these little interactions, like having a really good rapport with people, having a good time, if you're building all of those blocks up, it's not going to guarantee you success, of course, but it's going to put you on the most likely trajectory, because you can make all of those small minor things that all accumulate into the likeliest scenario.
Yeah, one of these cheesy racing sayings: we win together as a team, we lose together as a team. And I've crashed cars before, where the first thing out of my car chief's mouth was like, "Don't worry, we'll get it fixed." And I've also been on programs where it's like, I can't believe you did that. We're screwed. And it's like it becomes like a blame game.
Mm-hmm.
And the teams where it's like, all right, I understand that you might have made a mistake because you were trying your hardest to win for us. We're going to rebuild and we're going to come back. That team's always going to be the one that does well. The team that's like, well, yeah, you idiot, you crashed our car, or you broke something, or abused a part of the car that failed later. How are we supposed to win like that? Well, immediately now you're pointing fingers at each other instead of like pushing in the same direction. And so I've been fortunate enough to get on programs like that, but I also give myself some credit that I think I'm good at people. Like, I think I'm good at reading people. And if I get a warm, fuzzy feeling from someone that they're like-minded with me, like, we're going to have fun. We're also going to push as hard as possible, but we're going to go together. I'm your guy. Sign me up. If I get the sense right away, or I've seen other people come and go out of an opportunity, it seems like there's something there where they're changing drivers all the time, or they're changing crew all the time,
Mm.
Probably not something I want to sign up for unless it's, one off or something like that. And we have a like internal saying, like a lot of racers say, it's like, it's not your job to win races. It's your job to be putting yourself into winning positions.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you see a team that's always doing well, you might want to find out who they have
Right.
driving for them, or if there's opportunity there. Or if you see a car or a team that's starting to grow and you're like, hey, those guys are doing a really good job, I should get in early. Maybe I can work with them and it'll do well. But it's my job to put myself in that position to be able to win. You can stay with teams or teammates or car manufacturers that are not winning, but you like them. And it's like that that's when emotion has to kind of take a backseat to the career. And that's difficult because I already like you guys. We just met and I'm like, oh, these guys are good dudes. I want to see you do well. But let's say you're asking me horrible questions and this interview is just terrible, which it's not.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
It's not over
like,
yet,
well,
so
like, all right, guys. Well, it's good chatting with you. I'm probably not going to promote this. You know what I mean? So to me, it's like I'm constantly in that position of, is this program going to help me succeed to the level that I want to go to? But am I also going to enjoy my time there? Is it something I want to be a part of? And that's nothing to do with racing. That is just career decisions and reading people and timing and sometimes luck.
When earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that in this long period of time where you were getting your start and you were aspiring to having a really successful career, you said that you were told by a lot of people to like forget it. And of course, you were able to do the math on the odds yourself. I think that obviously with what we do, we've heard that message like for years and years and years of everything you're doing is wrong, just forget about it.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think that it's something that people who are, young people or people who aren't young, but they're trying to do something new. They've got an idea, they got something they believe in. Can you offer those people advice on how you deal with that disappointment, then maybe not negativity, but resistance, the external resistance, to how you keep persevering and stick with it?
Well, the first thing is you have to believe in yourself. Um, Having a lot of passion for something truly does make a difference, I think, because I had nothing to fall back on in terms of talent. Like I couldn't look back at my go-karting career because I'd only done minimal things. And so when I was like, I'm going to be a race car driver, I'm saying that out of heart and soul and passion for the sport. But the reality is I could have gotten in that car the first time and been horrendous, or I could have been like, fast but reckless, things like that, or around people that didn't want to see me succeed. So they would give me bad opportunities and things like that. But I think at the worst of it, because I'd have people telling me, this is a mistake, don't do this, you're not going to make it, you'll be back in school, 5 weeks later, things like that. And this carried on for years and years. But I didn't stop believing in myself because I figured at the very least, I am going to have a career where I've traveled, at an early age. So I've seen the world. I understand a lot more than the average teenager does. And in even my early 20s, I've been, quite a bit all over the world. I've been to every state by this point. Um, I'm going to have world experience like that. I've got great people skills because I'm very young working in an adult industry. So I'm the youngest guy in the pit lane at that point when I started by like probably 7 or 8 years. And then after that, it was like a big gap as well. I know the other guy. His name's Batim Barisha. he and I were the two young guys on pit lane in 2001. And now he owns a massive Porsche tuning shop out in Los Angeles. And I get to race cars. So we've had this success, but we both were in that level early on where it's like, this is going to wash out. You're going to have to go to college. You're going to have to get a job. You're going to be working for your dad as a mechanic. And I remember thinking, I'd rather try to make this happen than fail before even getting started by giving up on it. So I'm going to go for it. If I don't make it, I'm going to know how to work on cars. Cool. A lot of people have cars. That should work out. I'm going to maybe fail from being a race car driver to a team manager or a crew chief. That's what my father did. Made a great living, had a great life. That's not a bad place to be. So I guess the advice there, or the idea is like, you might have to pivot on your goal, but you never know, and if you don't try, you're definitely not going to know. So you got to go for it. And one of the one of the funniest things that's happened to me in my life from, let's say 13 years old until probably 30 years old, you couldn't have told me no. Like if someone was like, "Do you think you're good enough to be here?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm the best." But not the best, but yeah, of course I am. Of course I am. Of course I am.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you're comfortable and you are a known entity, and you start going, "Am I still good enough to do this?" And it's
Yeah.
like, how the hell did we get here? It went from undeniable delusion of like, "Oh, I'm definitely capable of doing this," to should I still be doing this? Like,
Yeah.
there's so many phrases. You're only as good as your last race. Uh, I've heard comics say you're only as good as your last show. Similar concept. Again, two of my close friends, Andy and Spencer. I've asked them. I'm like, do you ever doubt? Like even now, like you guys are solidified as legends. Do you doubt yourself? They're like, yeah, all the time. Like, okay, great, okay. So at the end of the day, we're all human. You can still get comfortable thinking that you're good at something you're not, and you can also be good at something you're not and think you're not. It's just how funny people are.
Ryan, what's the most difficult thing you've ever done in your life?
Hmm. Admitting I'm not as good at something as I thought I was, and admitting I'm wrong, which are like that's not a single incident thing. That is a growing up realizing sometimes you're just fucking wrong. Maybe that could be a thing for you guys. But because I by nature I'm competitive, so I'm argumentative. I want things my way, which for race car drivers you have to be a little bit selfish in that regard. So compromise, admitting I'm wrong, and uh, admitting a mistake. When you crash a race car or you do something you weren't supposed to do or whatever, actually owning up to it. I think that's probably the hardest thing for me. But now I feel like I've gotten to that. I'd say taking the steps to go to therapy. Like it's probably cheesy to say it, but like admitting like I could use some help. I don't know enough about myself that I'd like to know. How can I do that? And so like I'd say those are the hardest things.
Yeah, well, you've presented a very compelling and I'm a somewhat unexpected story of your career. I totally
Mhm.
thought you were going to be like I've just seen so many race car drivers that their story is the same. It's like, yeah, we got race go-karts and my family spent their
Mhm.
fortune on this and step by step they go up until, they're driving big cars on TV. And your story is very different than that. You've told us a story that is about um, taking your the values and the skills and the life perspective that you got from your parents and having a dream and believing in your dream and more importantly being willing to make serious sacrifices to achieve what you wanted, and that's where your success came from. It came from that sacrifice of years. It came from being willing to believe in yourself when you had maybe not a ton of empirical evidence that
Mhm.
success was headed your way, and then you eventually made it here. And I think that to me, like when you talk about admitting that you're wrong being the most difficult thing you've ever done, that's what's really compelling about any human story is when we change,
Mhm.
because you're going to change one way or the other in life. And it is either going to be new growth and it's going to be a change for the positive, or it's going to be um, a, a metastasizing of your personality and being closed off, and it's going to be decay. It's going to be a negative change. And so, you decide to change for the positive, and that's the connection that I think a lot of people have got to make is that it's success is one part of life, but being willing to change is so much more important personally.
Yeah, I spent from every waking moment at 13 years old until, my late 20s, early 30s, like racing is all that mattered. Like nothing else matters. Having a social life doesn't matter. Having a family doesn't matter. Just racing, 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 racing. And then I started to realize in my mid 30s, I'm like, hey, there's a lot more to life than this. I've dedicated so much time to this and I've gotten success, but what is quality of life? And so having the last, 5, 6 years of going, okay, I need to think about being, not that I think I'm a bad person, but being a better person. Like, what are things I could be doing just in general on a daily basis? What are things I could be doing less like social media, things that I was so invested in, where the reality is like life doesn't go on forever. My career will eventually come to an end. I want to be as happy and, you know, just gratified with my life as possible. What am I doing to ensure that that happens? But to your point, I had to be willing to change, evolve, and I also had to be willing to fail. I had to be willing to like go, hey, this might not work out, but if you don't try, you don't know. And I think a lot of people these days especially want something, but they're not willing to work for it. I know that's like people don't want to work. I don't mean that. I'm just saying that like because of the instant gratification that you get in a lot of different things in life now, you go to do something like join a race team or try to become a race car driver. It doesn't work out early, or any other type of, career in that regard. You're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to eat shit. You're going to have to take a lot of long nights. You're going to have to do things you don't want to do, work with people you don't want to work with. But I don't know anybody else that's had like an easy road to success in racing where they didn't have to do those things. Even people with personal finance or sponsorship from somebody are still going to have to do things they don't want to do, drive things they don't want to drive, work with people they don't want to work with. And that's part of it. So if you're willing to fail, I think you have a chance to succeed.
Excellent. Well, I don't think we're going to be able to do any better than that. So, Ryan, how can the universe come to you via the internet?
Uh,
Where you want to connect on social media? What you got going on? How can people find you and talk to you?
yeah, predominantly I'm on Twitter and Instagram, at Eversley or at Ryan Eversley. I don't really care about that as much as promoting my podcast, which is called Dinner with Racers. And you don't have to be into racing to listen to it. One of the best compliments we get are from spouses of people that follow our show when I meet them at races, and they say, "Oh yeah, I've listened to your show because my husband or my wife forced me to," and they like it. If they like it, I'm like, all right, like you're not a racer, you're being forced on this road trip to listen to us talk about rental car destruction and things like that. So if you're interested in motorsports at all, we've had the likes of Mario Andretti, Bobby Unser, Bobby Rahal. I mean, we get all sorts of people. If you're not into racing at all, but you might know the name Scott Tucker, who was notorious for payday loans. It was on Netflix, Dirty Money. We got him. No one else did but us and Netflix. And if you know who Stormy Daniels is, we got Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' lawyer, who also
Mm.
races. We just get all sorts of random stuff, and rarely is racing the main topic. So Dinner with Racers, if you get a chance. We also have a show on Motor Trend and on YouTube, Dinner with Racers, which is more of a docu-style show where we deep dive into things like the greatest cheaters in racing history, as well as what's racing like in Jamaica or Alaska. And we just do a bunch of random stuff like that. So, but yeah, that would be, my stuff's lame now. I just post pictures of race cars. I don't really, my one thing I will say, and this is something I truly believe in, you get a million fans by one at a time. And I give every fan that messages me or comes up to me, you get the same amount of time as anybody else. I don't, so good or bad, if you send me a shitty tweet, I'm probably going to reply to it. But I really appreciate how, like, we talk about social media a bit. You and I, we're having this conversation because of social media. So there are good sides to it. I have this tremendous fan base. I'm so grateful for them that have created that show and made that show possible. So please check that out if you get a chance. And I hope you guys like listening to this.
Yeah, well, our whole mission here is to expose people to things they may not be familiar with. And I hope that a lot of people will check out your show, and
Thanks.
because there's obviously a lot more to you than just nuts and bolts, race car driving. And I definitely will listen to it myself. And we're so grateful to you for your time today,
Thanks, man.
Ryan. And we're grateful for everybody who is willing to listen to this. And we'll talk to you guys next time.